Okay, all right. Here we go. Hello, Pod Day of America. This is Jake. I have with me today Mishka Shubaly, author, musician, guy I'm on tour with, friend of mine. I'll list all his credits in the bio, but I love you, buddy.
Good morning, Jake.
We're on tour. We're in a very strange Airbnb with a bathroom that just has a curtain, no fucking door.
I wish it had the hook where you could drag someone off stage.
I wish it had a door. Actually.
Dream big, buddy.
We're traversing across the country, playing house shows, bars, all sorts of weird stuff. Chicago tonight should be really interesting. But I wanted to get you on the podcast because I wanted to ask you about what happened to you in Newnan recently, counter-protesting neo-Nazis.
Yeah, a little bit of background. I'm a straight white dude, not particularly woke, but I'm trying. It's not that I don't care about political stuff. I definitely watched the elections go down in 2000 with mounting dismay, and I subscribed to The Nation for a minute. And but I've been here on a green card for a long time, and sort of just knew not to get arrested, and then just recently got my citizenship because I was like, well, this Trump guy can't win, but if he does, something tells me he's going to crack down on immigration, and I have a couple, I have sort of a spotted history, well documented drug and alcohol abuse, so I figured it was best to get my U.S. citizenship before the end of days.
You're the guy he was talking about. That hombre.
Yes.
Canada the whole time.
Exactly. The threat to the north.
These fucking hosers, I tell you.
So it's one of those things where for me, I've just been sort of watching shit get imperceptibly worse and worse. And liking shit on Facebook doesn't seem to be getting us big returns.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I once I got my citizenship, I kept sort of saying I need to do something. I need to put my ass on the line. I remember having a thought. I tour a lot, and I'm always worried about people breaking into the van or fucking with the van or getting shit from the cops or whatever, and thought about putting a a BLM sticker on the van, and then I was like, no, because I don't want to deal with the hassle that's going to bring on. And then right on the heels of that thought, I was like, oh, that's not a luxury that black people have. Just walking out on the street, that's a fucking political statement right now in Trump's America.
Yeah. I do know what you mean with your van, though, because if you shouldn't actively elect to do that, because your van is your house. And, you'd have to take your house everywhere with you.
Well, and it already looks like my other car is a pile of drugs and bad decisions. It's like, please pull me over.
Yeah, what you should do is you should put all the stickers on it.
Yeah,
Trump, Bernie, Hillary,
everything. Yeah,
keep them guessing.
And then the work that I do involves being on the road a lot, and I'm sort of booked 3 or 4 months in advance. So when a big political protest comes up, for whatever reason, always seem to be on the other side of the country, or I have a show or something like that. And then finally I got wind of this neo-Nazi rally that was happening in Newnan, Georgia, which is an hour and a half away. And I was just like, fucking do or die, man. Do you care about this shit or not? It's they're basically delivering it right to your doorstep.
I talked to Mike Gams last week about Standing Rock, and he's also a touring comic, and had a similar story with just this transient nature we have, and then realizing, well, this shit's an hour away.
Yeah. It's sort of like what. The world's biggest ball of twine is right off the highway. Well, I'm here. Do I care about twine or not? And I've through Facebook, I've gotten to be good buddies with a pretty committed Muslim Antifa activist who I will call H, and he's a good dude, and I guess I approached the whole thing from not from just a place of ignorance, but I know that I'm ignorant, and I know that Antifa has with the sort of norms, that Antifa has a horrible reputation, that they're really painted by by the mainstream news as bad or not as Nazis or worse.
Yeah, that seems to be the fun spin for every media outlet. It's it's dumb guys, smart guy stuff to go, whoa, excuse me, wait a minute, maybe this is actually bad for free speech, or maybe it's actually worse. And we sort of have this weird worship of civil discourse in this country, of like the West Wing and everything, but it's very funny because that's kind of an American concept. Direct action is an age-old practice that...
Yeah, people say, violence doesn't work. Well, it's like, read a fucking history book, man. It's like, there have been very few, peaceful passages of leadership,
Yeah, that monk, didn't set himself on fire and then put him out and go, well, sir, I disagree with you, but I'm gonna go home now.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not a fan of violence, but I'm 6'5", and it's a growing up, it's a language I learned to speak, and I'm okay at it. And one of the things that I thought going into this protest was, there's like Charlottesville was on my mind, and that black kid who got fucking stomped by 8 knuckleheads.
Yeah.
And my thought going into it was that I'm not going to swing first on anybody, but Georgia is a hold your ground state where if somebody comes at you, you're allowed to defend yourself. Uh-huh. And so my thought going into it was I will not be an aggressor, but I'm not going to stand by and watch somebody get hurt.
I will hold out 2 arms and spin in a circle like a windmill. And if anyone gets close to me,
yes.
If any neo-Nazi feels that they want to get close to me, I'll be punching like this. And if they walk into it,
I will blow them away.
Yeah. It's very interesting how states have these different rules, as if it's a game of tag or something.
Yeah. Well, and it's so arbitrary too, because on one side of the line there's these regulations, and on the other side of the line it's it's radically different.
And there's also something I've talked about with my experience at DHS, where just because these rules exist, they don't really. They're not enforced in the moment. They're all for after the fact in court.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like the civil discourse thing too. That people only want to stick to the rules when they're losing.
Yeah.
If they're winning, they're more than happy to let the rules fall by the wayside, and it's just when they're losing that they're like, oh no, you didn't play fair.
Yeah, if you're losing at a game of GoldenEye or Super Smash Brothers, suddenly there's a sacred rule where you're not supposed to screen watch. Yes.
So I just sort of got, I guess it was Saturday. I think it was 4/20. No, or
nice.
No, it was the 21st. I don't know. Around then, and I just hopped in my, here's a good little backstory. When I was in Colorado, somebody gave me a hit of acid, and I was and then I had a bunch of dishes to do or something, and I was like, this is going to be boring. I'm just going to take a tiny little corner of this hit of acid, and it's not going to do anything to me because I'm a large guy, and it's this tiny little piece of paper. So I took a tiny little corner of this hit of acid, and it worked. It definitely worked. And I just had a moment where I looked in the mirror and I was like, man, I'm just covered in all this oily pelt. I need to cut this off. So I shaved my head. So so I'm going into a neo-Nazi rally, and of course, and then also being on the road all the time. All the sunglasses I have, somebody gave me a big box of Salza branded aviator shades. So I basically, I look like a white power supervillain in like an 80s movie. Like, 6.5 feet tall, shaved head with aviator shades.
Yeah, I read your piece in, sorry, where was it published?
I published it on Medium.
And there, a lot of the recurring kind of joke was that, yeah, you looked like a cop, like people didn't quite trust you.
Yeah, like, and like I don't mind getting punched, but I just want to get punched for something I actually did, or I want to get punched by the right side, not the like. So I went like too much in the other direction of trying to clarify things, where I was like, how do I know that I look physically threatening, so how do I communicate to people that I'm not there to cause violence? And also, how do I communicate that I'm on the counter protesting side? So I was like, okay, so I got a shirt, and on the front I just wrote "free hugs," because I was like, that's the most disarming thing I can think of. And then on the back, I didn't want somebody to see me from the back and draw conclusions. So I know that the Nazi set is not just openly homophobic, but they're like actively terrified of gay people.
Yeah.
So I just wrote "Love Wins" because I was like, "Fuck it," if that's gonna scare them off, is this for me or for you?
That's an ambulance. So
that's me.
I think you.
Yeah. My ride's here. I love that dumb joke. And then I had a hat on to cover up my shaved head, and I knew, I was talking to my buddy H about what to wear and what to wear to the rally.
What to wear.
And he said, he sort of confirmed what I already knew, which is wear something you feel comfortable like running and moving quickly in. Wear close-fitting clothing so people can't like grab onto it. And
wear something that brings out your eyes.
Yes. And he said wear sunglasses in case somebody tries to spray something in your eyes.
Yeah.
So I had the only pair of sunglasses I had that weren't aviator shades were a pair of pink sunglasses my buddy Josh McLean left at my house. So I'm wearing, so that's
like
what I was wearing.
Fear and Loathing style.
They just it looked like the kids sunglasses you get at the dollar store or whatever.
Yeah.
So
don't worry about it.
So that's what I was wearing, and what I, in hindsight, what I really looked like was a cop trying to very clumsily go undercover.
Dude, I love when you see undercover cops in New York that are, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And then,
come on, we're trying to record a podcast. Have some respect. I'm just kidding.
And it's emergency vehicles. People are dying.
Yeah, I know. People are dying to hear "Pod Damn America." All right, but like when you see undercover cops in New York, like, it's so obvious because they don't, they live in their own bubble and they have their own culture. So their idea of what a dude casually hang out in society is very specific, and it's like. Always like,
They look like they walked out of some 80s movie. Like, Judge Reinhold is undercover cop.
Yeah.
Hey, man, can we get some beers?
It's always these shitty little piggish dudes with like a scrunched up, sports team hat of some kind and like...
The backwards baseball hat.
Yeah. Just weird gym clothes, but like just an air of like anger that just reeks of cop,
Yeah. Well, they also, if they've been beat cops, they hold their hands further out to not hit their gun, even when they're not, even when they're not wearing...
Yeah, that cowboy shit.
Yeah. But, so that's what I look like. I look like a fucking clown. So I went down to Newnan, which is sort of like in the the wilds of rural Georgia, and and I was supposed to Atlanta Antifa posted here's where we're meeting, so that's where I was headed to the meeting spot, and of course I was running late because fucking Atlanta traffic, waka waka waka, and so then I parked a little bit off the main like the main meeting place. And as I parked, there were a couple of like good old boys sitting in lawn chairs who were very just sort of like clocking me the whole time. But I was like, I don't have time to deal with this, so I just parked, got out of my van, and like walked away quickly. And I'd grabbed a bandana and then forgot it in the van. That's an important detail. So I just sort of hustled to the meeting place, and of course, like. I'm not even to the meeting place yet before somebody, a Stanhope fan, recognizes me and is like, "Hey, what's up, man? How are you? What's going on with the new record?" And I was like, I feel weird about product placement here right now. I'm here as part of an anonymous group trying to disappear into doing a good thing, to pushing back against fucking neo-Nazi assholes.
So you didn't set up a merch table?
I had them sign the mailing list. Yeah, selling merch at the neo-Nazi rally. Jesus. But so we met up on this street corner, and on it, and I was a little bit on edge. I mean, I'm sort of skeptical of everything, but I just felt strongly that I had to be there. And so we're all sort of like hanging out on the corner, and one by one, people come up to me with their arms spread, and I was like, "What, man? The Antifa is like really friendly." No, I'm wearing a shirt that says "Free Hugs," and a couple people read it and were like, "Oh, I'm going to take this guy up on it." So like came up to me and hugged me, and it weirded me out at first, but then I was like, "Oh fuck." And then there was a woman who came around with slips of paper with a lawyer's phone number on it to hand it out to people in case they got arrested. And it was like she handed it, to the two people to the left of me, looked at me, skipped me, and then went to the next person. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm on my own here. I'm I'm not fucking bros with the neo-Nazis. I've already like ired or set off the locals, and then Antifa doesn't want any part of me either.
Oh man, only you could write a country song called "Alone" at the neo-Nazi rally.
It's like the Breakfast Club. And then we were sort of just milling around on the corner there, and it was sort of like it was like we were waiting to go to a show, but they hadn't opened doors yet. It's like just a bunch of kids in hoodies and punk rock t-shirts, and sort of like my people, my folks, or whatever, And then there was this beautiful, unexpected moment where we gathered in front of this house with a big porch, and there were balloons on the porch, one that said 2 and one that said 1, and then this sort of all-American, blonde white girl walks out, like Norman Rockwell moment, and everybody turned around and saw her and just started singing "Happy Birthday," and I was like,
and someone pulled out a camera. I was like, "Vicious Antifa tactics."
Yeah, I wish they'd been fucking recording that. So we sang our "Happy Birthday," and as we approached the part where you say the person's name in the song, I was like, "What are we gonna do?" And like of the like collective mind was all the same, where we were all just like, "Happy birthday, dear mama." I was like, "Yeah, we're in this together, man. We're all human, but none of us know what to do here."
Yeah.
So we sang her "Happy Birthday," and she was sort of like beamed and looked a little like flushed and embarrassed, and then everybody applauded, and then a couple of fucking Humvees rolled up with the like Radley Balco warrior cops, 6'4", 240 pounds, strapped for war, like fucking bulletproof vests, assault rifles, helmets, goggles. These like 6 or 8 guys like jump off this Humvee, and me being an idiot, I was like, man, they're really serious about this Nazi shit. Like they're gonna fucking crack down on these guys.
No. When I went on Chocolate Trap House, Matt Christman made the point that like, that's the real fascist in this situation.
Yeah.
In the way that they have actual state power and are willing to, to sort of just act as a shield for these white supremacists. They're clearly not there to crack down on them or to sort of mediate as some sort of referee between both of these things. And the police really have a problem, and they're infiltrated with white supremacists because of the nature of the institution.
Yeah.
So, you know, they do a lot of standing and not doing anything. Like in Charlottesville, you know, shots were fired.
Yeah.
A guy opened fire at someone. Police looked on and did nothing. And doing nothing is like the sort of act of violence in that situation.
Yeah. The so they rolled up on us in the corner and they were like, you know, get off the sidewalk. You're blocking the sidewalk. We're going to arrest you. And so it's like everybody moved on to like the median. Or they're like, you're blocking the street. We're going to arrest you. You're wearing masks. We're going to arrest you. And I was like, what the fuck? This is like every you know, it's like you're standing on the ground. We're going to arrest you. Yeah. And I was like, this, you know. And I'm in my head is just sort of spinning, and then you know, everybody around me had a bandana on, and I didn't. And I was like, and I'd read up a little bit on what, you know, what my rights were and like what I could and couldn't do.
You, sir, are arrested for having a great time. Happy birthday. Start stripping.
Happy birthday, dear. Blah blah blah. And so I was like, fuck it. I'm not doing anything that they can arrest me for. I can stand on the sidewalk, and so I just sort of like stood in front of the people with the masks and was like, what are you going to arrest me for? I'm not doing any, you know, we have right of assembly. We're allowed to be here. And then I like looked behind me and everybody was gone. And it was just me like yelling at cops. And I was like, I don't know how this is supposed to work, but this isn't how this is supposed to work. So they had moved to the other side of the street. So then I sort of linked up with them on the other side of the street. And then, if you've seen any footage of Newnan, this is what you've seen, is we're sort of like moving away on the sidewalk, and then we were like up against a hedge, and a huge armored vehicle rolled up, and another like 8 or 10 cops piled off, you know, with assault rifles, like ready for war. And then at some sign, they started yelling, and they just like fucking ran into this crowd of, I mean, this young people, and like some of them maybe 17, 18, 19. Like, you know, I remember hugging this one kid, and I was like, is he like $120? Like, what is this kid gonna do if somebody fucking how will he defend himself?
Yeah.
So at some signal, these cops just fucking rushed into the crowd with their guns drawn, pointing them at people's chests, throwing kids to the ground, fucking like standing on them, kneeling on them. I saw like 3 or 4 of them kneeling on a woman who's, you know, people like crying out, and you know, and they're handcuffing people, like pointing guns at it's fucking, man, it's hard for me to describe because it's not a pleasant memory, but pointing guns at journalists, and I'm not a gun person, but I have friends who are, and they, you know, they've said again and again, like, the first rule of gun safety you learn is
you don't talk about gun safety, Club.
is you don't point the gun at anything you're not ready to destroy.
Yeah.
And so, and it's just, and people keep forwarding me this shit and like tagging me in pictures, and it's like, oh, here's, you know, these warrior cops with fucking assault rifles pointed at kids' chests, you know, and it's like, I don't tag me in this, man.
Yeah, it's a weird thing about being a public figure is a lot of times people, they remind me of like when a cat brings you a dead mouse, you know, and it's got this intention of like, you'll want this, and you're like, that's the last thing I want right now.
Yeah.
You know, but they mean well.
And, you know, and then from there, you know, it was a, listen, I mean, I understand that I went into this totally naive and totally dumb and totally unprepared for what I got involved in. But I'm skeptical of everything. I mean, obviously, I'm skeptical of, like, you know, America and the good guys, bad guys narrative. But I'm also skeptical of the left and skeptical of, like, conspiracy theories and, like, you know, treat everything and anything with, like, a healthy dose of cynicism.
Yeah, sure.
But to be in the middle of that situation and have everything, you know, and have so many things that I'd been told before, just concretely confirmed in front of my eyes that, like, the whole time I was there, I maybe saw like 2 or 3 like real Nazis, and never, and I was like, these guys are about to die from diabetes or a fucking 4-wheeler accident. Like, there was no threat to them
from being too pure.
Yeah. The only
too
time
good for this world.
The only time that I was scared was with the cops, that they were gonna fucking kill me, you know. And they throughout the day they just sort of followed the group of Antifa, like harassed us, attacked us. They had the charge and grab tactics where 8 of them would run into the crowd, grab somebody, throw them to the ground, cuff them, and then drag them out. And that happened again and again and again. And it wasn't, you know, one of the things that, you know, you naively understand about cops when you're a kid is that they're there to protect you. But this was strategic, tactical aggression on the point of the cops. They weren't reacting to anything. They were acting. They were proactive. They were creating this situation. And it was a fucking bummer, man.
Well, you know, I think it's something's kind of interesting as you're talking about having like these things cemented in your head when you see them in real life. And the way like a lot of propaganda works is that it creates myths that are easy to confirm if you're never anywhere near the fucking thing you're thinking about.
Right.
If you're, you know, far away behind a keyboard talking to a bunch of other people that have also been fed the same shit and you guys all agree with each other, then, you know, you can really... But as soon as you go to this shit and you see it up front, and this is a common experience I hear with like people who've gotten involved in political stuff and activist circles, is as soon as you see it, it kind of melts away a little bit. And you get a little bit of a different way of looking at it, which is, you know, it's good for people like us that tell stories, because then you can sort of pass the experience around. You know?
Yeah. The I mean, as a writer too, it was really interesting to me to see how this how the day was reported. So I was, you know, I spent 2 or 3 hours, you know, marching with Antifa. And then, you know, to see it reported that armed counter-protesters, right, which gives you the idea that we're marching with. Georgia's an open carry state, so that makes you think we're marching with guns or, you know, sort of like medieval pikes and battle axes or shit like that.
Right.
I saw. Granted, I mean, I'm not pretending to be some eye in the sky who saw everything and anything that took place, but I didn't see a single fucking weapon the whole time. I'm sure I'm sure some kids had fucking blades or something like that, but I didn't see a single thing.
If you were with an organized Antifa group, I mean, you probably didn't see any weapons because that's kind of part of it.
Yeah.
It's not really a thing where, you know, Antifa's saving up to get guns eventually. I mean, the part of the direct action is, you know, non-lethal.
Yeah. And the way it was reported was armed counter-protesters, and I was like, how are they advancing this narrative? There was one fucking Second Amendment knucklehead who showed up with his AR-15.
That was probably
open carry. Yeah, that might have been a fucking plant. But it was like one idiot standing on the corner. So all of a sudden now they're reporting it as armed counter-protesters, which makes a reader think we were all armed. You know, and then the Newnan Police Department was proudly showing off this shield that they had confiscated, and they said, "Oh, it's a weapon," because they were like, "Oh, it has screws, you know, pointing through the." It was shoddy carpentry, is what it was. It wasn't a weapon. There were like screws protruding 1/8 of an inch that they could sort of like hang a piece, you know, like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to scratch you," you know, like it was just. It was maddening. One thing that and then this is the thing that sort of sticks with me, that a takeaway that I sort of can't. One of the most chilling things that I experienced that day was, so after the initial, you know, charge from the cops, you know, when we were sort of progressed to the park where the rally was being held. You know, there was sort of a repeated, you know, charge and grab by the cops, but we didn't encounter any sort of like anything organized in Charlottesville. There was no, they reported that it was maybe like 30 neo-Nazis, and I encountered, you know, maybe 2 of them, and they're behind a fucking wall of cops. But at the end of the, I was there for 2.5 hours before I finally got stressed and freaked out enough that I was like, okay, I did my thing. I came out here, and I'm not going to wait around to see somebody get killed. You know, I put my time in, and I've had enough, and I got to go now. And so then I started walking back to my van, and I had a sign that I'd made that said, "America welcomes everyone except Nazis," which is not technically true, but you don't really have room for footnotes on a sign.
Yeah,
and I think it's an admirable sentiment. So I'm carrying this sign, like, you know, walking back to my van by myself, and I was thinking, now is when something bad is going to happen. I get back to my van, and the streets are deserted. You know, I mean, most of the people in Newnan either, you know, just sort of like left for the day or stayed inside. And as I'm unlocking my van, the two good old boys who are sitting in the lawn chairs roll up to me quickly. And, you know, my sort of like doorman's security, you know, my spider sense was a tingling. And so I turned to these guys, and I was like, "Oh, did you want to get some free hugs, you know, before I close up shop for the day?" And you know, there was one guy in mirrored shades, and then his boy behind him, and he was like, "No, we just, you know, we wanted to ask you a question." And I was like, "Okay." And he said, "Listen, we don't care which side you're on, you know, Nazis or Antifa. Like, we don't want you to park here." And I looked around, and I was like, "Well, I didn't see any signs saying no parking here." And he was like, "Yeah, I know. We keep to ourselves, and we don't want you parking here." And I said, "I'll tell you what, man. You keep the Nazis out, and you'll never see me again. Until then, I'll park wherever the fuck I want to." And I was like, and I was ready. You know, I was like, here, this is where it pops off.
Yeah.
And I was confident that, not that I could take both of these guys, but that I could hurt both of them before I went down. And then I just sort of like looked at them and waited to see what was going to happen. And then I was like, okay. And I turned around and unlocked the car and unlocked the van and drove away. But just the bullet points, the takeaway that, like, the Nazi menace, they're not that we should ignore them, but there was no menace there. There were like a bunch of old, like, white dudes who are like, one more can of Kodiak was going to fucking make him have a stroke.
That's what I think is interesting about the concept of Antifa, because, like, I think a lot of people think of it as an annoyance and a footnote, and this resurgence of direct action in America is something we would be better off without. We should beat them on a bigger scale in the culture or in Congress or something. But it's like, I think it's working. I mean, Richard Spencer admittedly canceled his tour over Antifa, yeah. And it's a good sign, and it's doing what it's meant to do, which is to discourage and embarrass people out of going down this rabbit hole.
And an observation I made once after getting tossed out of a bar back in the good old days was, if violence doesn't work, then why are bouncers so big? Because getting fucking thrown in a dumpster by somebody, I was like, ow, fuck, all right, I learned my lesson.
Yeah, there isn't a guy at the front of the bar who defeats you with logic and
he's gonna hurt
defeats you out of the bar,
Yeah.
I think this story is really interesting because you're a great storyteller, and I always think about you because I have sort of recently kind of put together a bit of a more political worldview and view things sort of like an ideology. But I always think when I write, there's like two gears for me, which is like personal and political, and they're two ends of a spectrum that are connected in, there's a spectrum, there's stuff going on between them, and there's a history of people understanding the relationship between the personal and the political, your personal experience and how it relates to like the whole world and the community and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I always think you have a really great ability to relate your personal experience in a way that that people can extrapolate other, things from there, right?
Yeah.
I was thinking about that in terms of like really Antifa, because like there's this thing with Antifa where the far right, the Breitbart freaks, they say things like Antifa super soldiers, and they try to paint this picture of this aggressive, like, weird ninja clan from like a cartoon or something. And whenever you meet these guys, they're usually nerds. They're small, little, soft dudes that have been bullied enough that they understand the experience of bullies. And
I will say this, the Atlanta Antifa groups, the visual that they presented was somewhere between the people who would go to a punk band that's a little bit long in tooth, and like a farmer's market.
Yeah.
There was like the gray ponytail people who were there, and then like a lot of like skinny kids, and good people too. Like at first they treated, they sort of like held me at arm's length, which that's what they should have done. That was the correct thing. They thought I was a cop, and like they can't be infiltrated. That is important. I don't have any hurt feelings about that. But then I did get in the cops' faces a couple of times where I was like, is this what you signed up for, to protect Nazis?
Uh-huh.
Is this what you're about, to protect and serve Nazis? And they didn't like that.
Yeah.
And when they saw me doing that, then a couple of people were like, hey, we're going this way, man. Or they sort of like brought me in. And then when I published the account of being at Newnan, the woman who had passed over me, who hadn't given me the slip of paper with the lawyer's number on it, created a Twitter account just so she could write to me and say, hey, I'm sorry, I thought you were a cop. But she like felt bad, and I was like, oh man, don't feel bad for a second. You were doing your job. You were doing exactly what you had to do.
Yeah, well, I think that they probably, this is probably not that uncommon of an experience in that world, because like, there is like, there's a comedian, Barry Crimmins, who I always think about when I think about this particular mechanism I'm about to describe. But like, Barry, rest in peace, died last year, was a victim of a lot of things growing up, and that's why he became so hardcore of an activist and like a defender of people as an adult. But like, you're kind of the reverse, right? I think you're a bit of a reformed tough guy,
Yeah, that's one of the narratives. Yeah,
that's something I've got from talking to you before.
Yeah. I became a bully later in life.
Yeah.
Hopefully a bully for justice.
Right, but, and that's the thing, is like, now you're showing up to something like this and going, okay, well then how do I help,
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see those 2 points of view converge in solidarity against, this bigger threat,
Yeah, it's so funny too to see how like perception has changed. For me, it felt important for me to go, very much because of the way that I look. Like I want, I kind of want to try to redeem the white American male a little bit. That I felt like it was important for me to be there for, for the neo-Nazis to see that a very Aryan-looking bro wants to see them die in a fire, and and also, for people of color to know that like we stand with them, and that and more than that too, that like I will stand in front of a cop to protect you, this is a weird thing to talk about, but like I recognize, living in New York for 18 years, I never got mugged. I have large privilege, which is that I'm a big dude and like people don't fuck with me really. and that's great for me. But there was also, there's a time where it's like, if you have that privilege, you have to sort of accept some responsibility with it too. And I felt like that it was, like I said, a bully for justice. An interesting thing too an interesting takeaway I had from telling the story on Medium and seeing the way people on my Facebook feed responded to it. My Facebook is mostly people who, not necessarily people I know, but people who know my music or my writing or whatever, is as I didn't see anyone from Antifa commit an act of violence or anything close to an act of violence. Nobody threw a punch, nobody threw a kick, nobody threw a rock, nobody spit. There was like nothing approaching violence. At one point when we were walking back towards the center of town, there was the guy who was not a neo-Nazi but a redneck shit starter wearing a MAGA hat. Yeah. And that was the element I was the most nervous about. He charged into the crowd, sort of shouldering people out of his way, and somebody knocked his hat off, that's exactly what he wanted. Yeah. And then there was a little bit of a scuffle, and a woman in a head covering picked it up, and then he grabbed it from her, and they were sort of struggling over it, and then she dropped it, and it fell to the ground. He bent over, and I kicked him in the ass as hard as I could, to the point that my leg was sore for 3 or 4 days after that. And then the next day, I saw I found an Instagram video of him being interviewed by somebody, and he was like, I'm just good, I'm just an observer. I'm an American citizen. I just came out here to watch and to see, what's going on. These Antifa people, they surrounded me, they kicked me, they punched me, they spit on me. Bullshit. I was right there. I saw you. I saw what you did, and I saw what happened to you. And I was the one who kicked you. And there was one person who committed violence against you, and it was me. And when I told this story, when I told this in the Medium article, again and again and again, there are all these people commenting on my narrative, being like, "Oh, Antifa, they're scum, they're violent, they're bad people, they're worse than Nazis." Not one single person called me out for committing violence. The only violence in the entire piece, it was committed by the cops and me, and nobody, or very few people, said anything critical about the cops, and nobody. There's this othering of Antifa, that they're the menace, they're the bad guy, these masked villains, and I was like, no, man, I was with them, and I did a bad thing, and no one called me out on it.
Yeah, well, that's not the story people want to write, and that's not the story people want to hear.
Yeah.
It's more complicated, and to talk about the police being violent is like, oh, well, they're an institution, so
they're just doing their jobs.
Yeah, and the story, the pseudo-intellectual story is always that this new thing is somehow going to destroy the fabric of our, so precious and functioning society that we live in already,
Yeah.
It's, as I've covered on the show before, it's not new. You just know about it now if you're some dude sitting at home on a recliner watching Fox News or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, that's a great story. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm glad you kicked that guy's ass.
I'm sorry too. I'll be honest with you that the week after that happened, I had a pretty shitty week, of just, and I was like, oh, maybe I have a little touch of the old PTSD from from the gun violence in my past, because I couldn't. I had a hard time getting over both having a gun pointed at me and seeing these fucking kids getting stomped by these huge cops. And but I don't regret going. I would fucking do it again, and I'll stand with anybody against Nazis and against fucking warrior cops.
Yeah, word. Cool. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah.
You should plug the record and all that stuff, though.
Oh, I have a record.
Fantastic plug.
that was heartfelt, right? That seems kind of corny on the fucking tail of this. I have a new record called When We Were Animals. which now seems kind of prescient from his, was it MS-13, who fucking Trump called out as animals.
Man, like, the news is so weird, you can't predict it, and sometimes it's going to twist stuff like that. Do you ever heard that story about Carlin in 9/11?
No.
He
did it?
Yeah. He put together a jet fuel can't melt steel beams. He put together and like produced an entire special, and like the punchline of it, and I think maybe the title was it was like, it makes me happy when large amounts of people die. And that was like in a non-9/11 time, kind of, he's doing a little ironic twist thing, and he had a punchline for it. But he recorded it on 9/10, and then like the next day just had to cancel the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's just like, this can't happen, Yeah. But I think When We Were Animals is a little bit more.
What's ironic is that
it's also extremely personal, like I was saying. So
the working title for the record was Not From Here. Because
even worse,
yeah. Because like anywhere I go, people are like, "Oh, where are you from?" And it's like, "Well, I was born in Canada, but I left there when I was 8, and then I lived in New Mexico and New Hampshire and Massachusetts, and spent time in like California, Colorado, the Virgin Islands, New York City."
I'm from the van.
Yeah, and so when it just got to a thing where like people would ask me where I was from, and I would have to just be like, I'm not from here, or they would be talking to me, and then one of them would turn to another one and be like, he's not from here. And so I had that weird thing of being like a fucking white bro, but I am an immigrant, and just sort of like that people were like, oh, he's one of us. No, he's not one of us. That weird duality that sort of flickered back and forth. But then I felt like calling it Not From Here made it seemed like I was poaching the turf of people of color who are immigrants who experience that on a much more virulent level. So I was like, I'll go with something more personal. When We Were Animals, and there you go. It's like, now it's political.
Mishka's new record is called MS-13, and then it's just a bunch of skulls.
That's my initials.
Oh my god! Yeah. I didn't even think about that. We should have named our tour that shit.
Next missed opportunity. We got to work on the branding.
Yeah.
Hashtag the Resistance Tour.
Cool. Well, thank you for talking to me. If you're listening, I cannot plug Mishka Shubaly enough. I'm a huge fan. He writes great music. Writes in a great way in general, and you should check him out because he's constantly on the fucking road. So he's coming to your town soon, and he puts on a great show.
Playing a living room near you.
No shit. All right, that'll work.